Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Bard. Keep bringing you episode 138 here at the tavern, presented by HeroTaku.com. So, it took a very, very long time, but I have finally finished watching every episode and every movie of Resha Sentai ToQger. For those of you who also follow my vlog series, you know that I have done a vlog on every single episode of ToQger, and of course all the corresponding movies, with the exception of the upcoming ToQger Ninja movie. And I don't feel like I need to wait and review that before I actually talk about ToQger as a whole. I'll probably eventually talk about it somewhere down the line, but right now I don't need to go ahead and do that. But now that I've actually watched the entire series, I think it's time that I give you guys my final thoughts on them. Now, of course, I did go ahead and give you guys my final thoughts on Kyryuger when it came out. I gave my final thoughts on Go Buster after it came out. But I'm in a different place with ToQger simply because I took the time to not only watch all the episodes and movies, but write down notes and examine them a little bit more in depth and detail. So I think going into this final thoughts segment, I'm a little bit more well informed because again, I took that time. I remember the plot threads and everything. Now, I'm not going to do a Linkar where I have, everything kind of written out in a script or anything. This is just going to be, again, one of those off-the-cuff things. Maybe one day I will do an overall history of Super Sentai. We'll see how that turns out. But the fact is, I think now is a good enough time to just go over the series because there are a number of things that I do want to go ahead and talk about in general for the series, because I know a lot of my fans don't follow my vlogs, so this will be an opportunity to talk to those fans who don't follow the vlogs to say, hey, this is what I spotted. Now, just to be clear on a couple of things, I'm going to assume that you have seen every episode of ToQger going into this video. If you have not, I'll have a link to TV Nihon down below, and you can go check out their downloads and watch the entire series. I will also make the assumption you probably have not seen my vlog series, so I will have a link to that as well if you wish to take the time and watch all my vlogs. They are extensive, they were very time consuming and everything, but hopefully you may enjoy them. So nevertheless, again, I'm going based on the fact that you have not heard the vlogs, but you have seen the series, and we're just going to go from there. Now, up until ToQger, I would say that my least favorite Sentai series, of the ones I've watched, and keep in mind I've not seen every Sentai series there is, but my least favorite was Goseiger. Now, the problem that I had with Goseiger, overall, if I had to say there's an overall problem with Goseiger, is that it was boring. There was nothing really new or fresh or interesting to the series. Yeah, yes, it did some interesting things. They had some good concepts in there, but they didn't fully realize a lot of things. And it seems like the series was playing really safe compared to what we got the year before in Shinkanger and what we got the year after in Gokaiger. It really was just kind of a generic Sentai series, but it was incredibly boring. Of course, Megaforce has painted a different light on, of course, since then. But looking at Ghost Age by itself, it's just a boring series. I can't say I dislike it. I can't say I dislike any Sentai series, but it was just boring. The crime that I'm going to pin on ToQger, however, is that it was stupid. Which I know is an odd claim because a lot of you are going to say, well, it's for children, of course it's stupid. And again, I don't buy into any of that BS, so don't tell me that that's not how I approach the series, okay? That's not how I approach anything on here as far as it's being for children. I look at it as a work of art, and it's telling a story, okay? Everybody understand that. I just want to make sure everything is clear. So, that being said, ToQger is stupid in its premise and its execution. Actually, let me put it this way. The premise is not even stupid. The premise could work, but it is the execution that was the problem. So here's the overall story and the overall problem that I have with ToQger in this regard. So the series is based on the feud, the fight, the war, whatever you want to call it, between the Rainbow Line and the Shadow Line. The rainbow line, by its nature, is light. Shadow line, by its nature, is darkness. But on the side of the rainbow line, it is powered by imagination. As I talked in one of my vlogs, if there was a greater power of the ToQger, because they will eventually adapt this into a Ranger key and say that they got greater power, it is imagination. That is what fuels them. And the thing about the series is that it talks about imagination, but it doesn't use imagination to its benefit. Sometimes it did in the earlier episodes, but as we got along, it really didn't do that. And here's the issue with the imagination part. The imagination early on was used in two main areas. Well, three actually. One was that when they would have their finishing attack using their cannon, instead of just being a traditional energy blast, they would have something ironic or odd that would destroy the enemy. I believe in the first episode they used it to where giant little stone statues fell on the monster and crushed it to death. That's an example of using imagination. The second use was with the character of Kagura, who I will talk more about in detail later, where she would use her imagination to pretend she was something, and then she would become that thing. So she would pretend that she was a Supergirl. She's like, I am a Supergirl, I am a Supergirl, I am a Supergirl, and suddenly she has super strength and can take out all these villains by herself. That's a good use of imagination. And third, they would typically use it in combat. The most prevalent one is where they used, where they were trapped in the coffin, and they used one of the Zords in a non-traditional way to punch itself out of the coffin. I'm not even going to tell you exactly what they did because, well, I'm above such things here, so you guys know what I am talking about. But that was kind of the idea, is in the early episodes that they would use the power of imagination and supplement to their traditional Sentai armament to accomplish things that they could not otherwise do. But as the series went on, that really got pushed to the background. Kagura used less of her imagination. We didn't see as many interesting tactics with the Zords. And even the cannon at some point eventually was replaced by a cannon that just shot energy blasts. It's kind of odd that they use imagination in the series. That's the tagline of one of the characters. And yet, imagination's not even used throughout most of the series. I don't know what they could have done exactly, other than what they did do, but maybe they should have done more of it within the series. Why didn't they use unconventional tactics? I mean, again, a couple of times they did later on in one of my favorite episodes, which is what they stormed the castle, or excuse me, stormed the tower to get the syringe monster, and they used the car carrier to jump over into the building and crash through the window. I mean, that's obviously a good example of using your imagination. But they just didn't capitalize on it throughout the series, and that was kind of disappointing. What also is disappointing is that neither the imagination or the rainbow line nor the shadow line was very well defined. Okay, so with the rainbow line, it's basically a pre-existing train line that has been around since imagination has been around, and obviously before trains. But again, the backstory is a little bit confusing. So it's powered by people's imaginations, and the only people that can see them are people with great amounts of imagination, typically children. So adults can't see them, but children can. Except with that, here's the thing: a couple things don't make sense. One, only children can go ahead and see them, adults can't. But why can the bad guys see them? Are the bad guys endowed with imagination? It's never explained into the series. Also, the trains are occupying real tracks where trains are coming back and forth. So either A, the rainbow line is not on a track when it's occupied by another train and it's aware of a train schedule, or it phases through the other trains to where, it could be parked at, Kikonai Station, and then another train comes in and it's overlapping because it's out of phase with the universe or something like that. Again, not explained. It's also explained that when Sputnik went up, that there was enough imagination to extend into space, and that there is a galaxy line that comes around. I think it's every 25, 50 years. Again, I forget the exact number off the top of my head. But there is a train that goes from Earth to Mars to Mercury to Uranus and all that. And that there is somebody driving that train who has no passengers. And there are stations throughout the rest of the solar system. So my question is, who's using the train? If the rainbow line is taking the form of a train from imaginations, then why is it going to these places, and who is it taking to these places? Because as I said in my Galaxy Line movie review, what child is getting on the Galaxy Line and being transported to Mars? Because I'm assuming if children see them, children may board them, but it's never explained in the series. Further, let's take a look at the Shadow Line. We know that they come from a realm of darkness, but it's not described, or it's not explained what that darkness means exactly. Because what we see in the series is that when the darkness spreads and it takes over a town, it freezes the town in time and removes it from existence, meaning that the town completely disappears with the inhabitants inside still frozen, and the rest of the world doesn't know that they exist. I read a story one time online where this girl finds a genie in a mirror, and she wants to change the world or change herself, and she's like, but won't people know that I'm different in some way? And the way the genie explains it is that if you throw a rock into a lake, the water doesn't immediately move out of its way and make room for the rock to go down the water, but instead the water encompasses the rock, covers it, and thus, in some slight way, the shape of the lake is altered because that rock is now in existence. So basically, what it's trying to say is that the world has changed, but it's always been this way with this change. And in a way, that's what happens with the Shadow Towns. They disappear, and everybody who may have known somebody there, lived in that town, visited that town, grew up in that town, whatever, if they're not in that town, it somehow is erased from their memory. Although physical things like being listed in books and things that were made in that town, that's never explained. But the question is, what is the end goal of the darkness? Because that's never explained. This cover the world in darkness. And it's like cover the world in darkness. Step 2, step 3, profit. That's the thing. It's kind of missing what it is. Again, one thing I describe this as is that if you take a look at the never-ending story, the nothingness is a metaphor for no existence after death, for a lack of existence. There's nothing, and that's everybody's fear, is a lack of existence. And in some ways, the darkness is like that in ToQger, but it's not. It's not an allegory. It has no deeper meaning. What we see when people are affected by the darkness, in terms of the town is taken over, they are frozen in time. They are not ceasing to exist. They are not killed. They just are frozen in time. Now, that is bad. I will say that. But I don't see it as bad as the nothingness from Neverending Story. There has to be, again, one of the positive elements of RPM is that Venjix wants to kill every human. He wants to commit genocide and have the entire human species go extinct. That is a threat that I at least understand. I don't understand the threat with the darkness. You want to cover the world in darkness? Fine. Everybody's frozen in time? Fine. But what type of civilization do you have exactly? I mean, if Zed covered all of Earth in darkness and he was the ruler of it, first of all, what about his human subjects? Are there going to be any subjects for him to control? And if not, we have the creatures may have darkness, but what kind of world do you run? Do you have currency-based economics? Are you you're an emperor, so are you a figurehead? Is there a high council out there? Do you control everything yourself? What kind of rules do you have? Are they draconian in nature? Are they democratic? None of that is explained. I can't follow the conflict between the Shadow Line and the Rainbow Line other than good and bad. I'm not seeing anything else. I mean, if the Rainbow Line wins, it's status quo. If the darkness wins, then what? Again, I don't understand what the consequence is, how horrible the consequences are. And again, I'll talk about this. Like, you look at Rita from the first season. What if she defeated the Power Rangers and took over the world? What is different about Rita than, say, the president or another dictator or something like that? You need to be able to define clearly what your villain wants and what will happen if they win. And again, the positive thing about RPM is they did explain that if Venjix won, which is the name of an episode, all humans would be dead and there'd be a world controlled by machines. I get that. It makes sense. I don't know what the machines are going to do when it's only them around, but again, you understand it better than what's going on with the Shao line. So, off the bat, the conflict is very confusing. The second thing is who the Rainbow Line, how the Rainbow Line operates in relation to the ToQger and people that are there. So, basically what happens is when Subaru Gahama is taken over, the 5 children that we know as the ToQger are turned into adults and become ToQger. And it's implied throughout the series that there are people who work and maintain on the Rainbow Line. We see characters like Conductor, Ticket, Wagon, the President, later on Akira. But we never see anybody else in this conflict. When they go to the Hyper Resha terminal, which is where the President is, which is their big Zord, and that's where the Zords get fixed and everything. The only person we see in that entire building is the President. There is no one else staffing that place. It's clean. There's places to go ahead and eat. There's repair sections. But there's not a single soul in there. And even when Zet takes over the Rainbow Line, he invades, there is no opposition to him. So why do we have only 4 people on the entire Rainbow Line? And what goal are you working towards exactly? Because, yes, you're fighting the Shao Line, but if the Shao Line's not around, and we find that they defeat the Shao Line, they have 10 years of relative peace, what are you doing? Are you trying to expand imagination so everybody can see you? And what if everybody does see you? Then what? Do you become free and cheap transportation around the galaxy and help people go to other planets or get from one state to another? Also, is the Rainbow Line only within the country of Japan? Is there a Rainbow Line in America? Is there a Rainbow Line in Africa? Is there a Rainbow Line in Russia? Never explained. That's something that's never brought up either. And when we do see other people working for the Rainbow Line, it's to perform a musical number. Of course. Yes, there is an episode where the Conductor gets 4 members of the Rainbow Line to come help the ToQger, not to fight, but rather to play music on the drums and the keyboard and whatnot. Never any other time do they actually help. They're there to play music, and they are an unseen force throughout the rest of the series. Not to mention, there was some issue where a lot of the Resha were lost, and they disappeared. Nobody knew where they were. Never explained how that happened. How they just kind of disappeared, and the Fire Resha ended up in a park, and the Diesel Resha ended up in a museum, and the Tank Resha ended up in the side of a mountain. Never explained. That's part of the stupidity of the series, is that they don't have a, let me put it this way, they don't have a consistent mythology of the series. They say this exists, that exists, this exists, that exists, but they don't explain why it exists. And that's something that bothers me. If we take a look at other Sentai series, they do have mythologies based around them. Okay, Zoo Ranger, just as an example off the top of my head. We have 5 warriors who were cryogenically suspended, or whatever you want to go ahead and call it, to fight Bandora should she return sometime later. Now, we know that their tribes don't exist anymore because they were probably taken out by the comet, the meteor, or they died out being ancient civilizations. That's enough of the mythology, I think, to get the series going, where you don't ask far too many questions. Obviously, you can ask why are humans and dinosaurs existing at the same point in history, but that's just the way that universe portrays it, that dinosaurs and humans lived in the time of the Flintstones. I get it. But with ToQger, you're trying to say there is this thing such as imagination, which has existed since humans existed, and that there's this train that goes across the solar system, but nobody's on it. We have this place where people are working on it. Nobody's there that we ever see, and that they're powered by imagination, but they don't have any other goals other than fighting the Shao Line. Again, when I first started watching the series, it was my theory at the time that they would have the Rainbow Line was a construct made from the imaginations of our 5 heroes, and that would have explained a lot of things in the series. But that wasn't what it was. It was pre-existing. It had always been there. So shut up and don't ask any questions. That's pretty much what was going on. And then the myth of the Rainbow Line is also confusing because, again, the 5 children become the ToQger were given these powers, but more interestingly enough, they were turned into adults. Now, here's something that I've never seen anybody bring up in conversation, but I'm going to go ahead and bring it up. So, what's interesting is they were children and they were turned into adults, but they still have the mind of children because it is their imagination that helps them fight. But we see in the series at various points where they are turned back into children, and then they are still able to morph. Now, unlike Kiba Ranger and Justin over in Turbo, they're not children that grow into adult bodies to fight. No, they are children, they're 4 feet tall, and they are completely morphed, which is kind of hilarious for one reason or another. And of course, there's this whole thing about they have the child actors as themselves, they have the adult actors themselves. And if you go watch the epilogue movie in the video I did on that, because I think I go into more detail. I'm not going to try and go too much detail there, but I have to ask this question about it. Why bother with adult actors and child actors? Why not do one or the other? And here's what I mean. If you wanted to do adult rangers, then why not just have 5 teenagers or 5 adults who still have imagination? Because it's said a number of times throughout the series that children have imaginations, and when you grow up, you lose your imagination. We see that with the ToQger in the epilogue movie. They grow up, they lose their imagination, they're no longer able to morph into the ToQger. Fine, I get that. Then why didn't we make our heroes adults so that they have the imagination, that's what's unique about them? They're not just children with imagination who are turned into adults, but they are adults who still retain that imagination from their childhood. That's what makes them special. That's what makes them unique. Frankly, the way it's set up in the series, it doesn't really make them unique because they're just 5 random kids who happen to all be best friends. There's nothing special about them that makes them into the ToQger. Now, you could argue they have high levels of imagination, but I would imagine you go anywhere in Japan and you find kids around the world and they would just have just as much imagination. So why couldn't it be 5 adults who had great amounts of imagination? Because I just think that would make them more unique characters. Or, conversely, what you could have done is made them children. Have 10-year-olds as the main characters throughout the entire series. And when they do morph, they are turned into adults. I mean, Big Bad Beetleborgs did it. The whole premise, you had 12, 13-year-old kids who would then go into adult bodies to become the Beetleborgs. So why wasn't that something that was done here? Why did you have to spend the money to get a child cast and an adult cast when you could get one or the other? And if you went with the child cast, then you would make it a little bit more unique. They'd get into these adult bodies, and it would be consistent with the morphing that we've seen throughout the series. Now, one of the things I actually do like is that the morphing is unique to whoever morphs. Again, as we've seen, Ticket morphs into Tokyo Rokugo, but he's still a puppet with the suit on. I think that's unique. And as an example I use in the series, if I'm an Andalite from the Animorphs franchise and I morphed, the suit would fit me based on my Animorph physiology, not put me into some predetermined humanoid form, much in the same way with the Shadow Ranger and the SPD and Deka Ranger, who has to have his head molded essentially to fit into the helmet of the Shadow Ranger. It just seems you could have done it one way or the other, but you kind of did it in the dumbest way possible, or at least the way I look at it. Either you need to have them... Again, I don't understand the point in this of having the adult and the child actors at the same time, because then we get into the time travel nonsense. Then we have to worry about later things down the line, like when those kids grow up, are they going to be the ToQger adults? Or, because you know what's going to happen is by the time they get to 2025, the ToQger as they look now, the adult actors will not look the same. They will look relatively significantly older. So they kind of screw themselves in any future continuity, which they will do, because by that time we'll have a 50th anniversary, and I would be shocked if they didn't bring them in. And as I've said, when ToQger appear in later films, like when they do this crossover with Ninja, is it after the series? Do they become adults to Rainbow Line again? Is it in the year 2025 when they're adults? Why aren't they turning into 4-foot Rangers if it takes place within the continuity of Ninja? All these questions, and they made it more difficult than it needed to be. That's one of the other problems that I have, is that they made it more difficult than it needed to be. What I'm also disappointed at is that, so the first half of the series was the mystery of why they only remember being children and where's their hometown, what happened to it, which was a pretty decent mystery. then we found out they were children turned into adults. What I would have liked to have seen, and we kind of got a little bit of this or echo of it within the epilogue movie, is that they're they're one way as children, but another way as adults with their memory. But when they lose their memory to be adults, they revert to their childlike form. So let's take Kagura as an example of that. As a child throughout the series, she's afraid, she's scared, she's not confident in herself, and everything's kawaii. That's how her character is throughout the show. But when she becomes an adult in the epilogue movie, she's more serious. She's wearing all this nice makeup and stuff. She's carrying a purse. She seems a little bit more vain in herself. She seems like a typical young Japanese adult. Now, wouldn't it be interesting if we had this young Japanese adult who, is very serious about herself and committed to whatever she's doing, and then she loses all her memories to when she was a child, and she can only remember her childhood, and thus she reverts back to being that childlike self. That's what I thought the series was going to do, is that they would forget who they are, and then remember all these memories of who they were, and then suddenly, surely turn back into themselves throughout the series. So Kagura starts as that happy little childlike girl in the first episode, but by the last episode, she has fully returned to her adult, mature, vain, serious type of self. But we didn't get that. Because honestly, the way the actress plays Kagura in the show and in the epilogue movie are two different characters, because they are two different characters at that point. And we see her remain static. We don't see anybody significantly change through the series. You can argue Wright does, but based on the last episode in the epilogue movie, Wright is pretty much the same character from start to finish. All the characters are, with the exception of maybe Akira. But again, I'll get into him. So again, those are kind of like the main things I have with the series overall. Again, as far as why did you make them kids in the first place, I don't get that with what they did. I don't understand the conflict between Rainbow Line and the Shadow Line. And just as a minor aside here, the lighting. Here's the weird thing about it, is that the lighting is very bland, very even, very uninspiring. When they represent the darkness in the show, they always represent it by this black, smoky, purplish cloud. You would think that in a series when it's between light and darkness, they would do something creative with the lighting. Like when we see Zet in his palace and the darkness is consuming him, all we see is this purple-black smoke coming off him. We never see anything interesting with the lighting. We see nothing physically change. And I think that's something that the series does wrong, is that instead of actually relying on lighting and tricks and techniques to show darkness, they just have everything evenly lit and use the special effects to show darkness. And I think that's a terrible, terrible waste. Another thing, too, is this series is the second shortest of all the series in Sentai. I think only Jaka is the shortest, and that essentially got canceled in its second half. But the weird thing is, for a show that's very short, because it's like, 47 episodes, maybe less than that, they really don't do anything throughout the show. Because it's established in the first episode, they don't know who they are, they don't know where their town is, and they're on a journey to find it. That journey takes them a lot of places they should not be, because to me, it was going to be something akin to what Operation Overdrive did. Say what you will about the series, but it did have a somewhat serialized nature in that, again, they would have an artifact. At the end of it will lead them to a new artifact. A new episode begins with them seeking that artifact based on where they were before. And I thought something similar would go ahead and happen with ToQger, that at the end of the episode, they'd learn something new, so they would go follow this clue here, this clue there, and then they would ultimately get to their hometown and find out the mystery at the end of the series. Not what happened at all. They took a lot of episodes to nowhere, basically. Here are 3 episodes that I just did not understand. They had an entire episode where Akira was trying to save a bathhouse from a greedy investor who happens to be a monster. Did not get that one. They had one where what I assume is a gay stereotype is falling in love with Mio. That went nowhere. And then they had an entire episode where Kagura gets in her mind that she's a Hollywood Golden Age director and decides to direct a movie for whatever reason. Again, I don't know if they knew they were going to have this few of episodes or if it was canceled before they got to do certain episodes or whatever. But if you're going to have a limited run like that, you don't need to be having episodes where you're meandering around and BSing and doing nothing. Every episode should have had something significant in it. I know you have to have those filler episodes, but you can still have filler episodes that actually connect to the story. How did the bathhouse episode do anything for the series? Seriously, what did it do? Yeah, Kira likes bathhouses, but it never, never, never comes up again later in the series. The gay guy never, never, never comes up in the series afterwards. And here's a plot thread that went absolutely nowhere. Takachi's in love with Mio. Yep, went nowhere at all. And I'll talk more about that later on, too. The movie episode, nowhere. Nothing important happened in that. Oh, and Kagura, who maybe got 3 or 4 episodes dedicated to her character exclusively, what's one of the episodes she has? She learns to bake a cake for Mio's birthday. I'm not joking, folks. That is an episode. That is the plot line. She can't cook and goes to a chef to teach her how to make a birthday cake. When, as we've established, I am a Supergirl. I am a Supergirl. I am a Supergirl. Why couldn't Kagura go like, I am a world pastry chef. I am a world pastry chef. I am a world pastry chef. That never happened either. Okay, all right. Let's talk about. Actually, all right. Before we get, I will say here is my favorite episode of the series. It is the episode where they have to storm the building to get the syringe monster to save the town, the karate town, basically. I think this is episode 32. I should have written this down. I'm sorry, guys. But it's the karate town episode. The lighting on that was amazing. The action was amazing. The story was amazing. The character dynamic was amazing. If that had been the standard to what ToQger had, it would have been an amazing series. But all we got was the one episode, so there we go. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the individual characters. Let me just start with the villains here. First of all, didn't care for Mork. Nothing special about her. I don't even need to bother to talk about her, I think. Noir, Madame Noir. Nothing really interesting about her. Yeah. Schwartz. Now, Schwartz, he was an interesting character. I liked him. I liked the fact that he wanted to go against the Emperor. I'm still not quite sure why he wants to go against the Emperor, because I don't see what their ideological differences are, basically. But he wanted to go against them. I like the way he did it, that he had an insurrection against them. But beyond that, there isn't too much to his character other than his relationship with Glitter, because Glitter doesn't want to marry the Emperor. She falls in love with Schwartz, and a lot of what Schwartz does and a lot of what Glitter does is motivated by that relationship. But by the end, it is a tragedy in the same way Romeo and Juliet is, except that it's nowhere near as interesting, to be honest, because Schwartz dies, Glitter is alive, and the last we see of her is with Zet, and I'll get into him in just a minute here. Nero, again, nothing interesting about him. The only thing interesting about the villains as they started out is they had that great aesthetic design of the 1800s Wild West train motif. Even the crows, the foot soldiers had that. But it wasn't anything interesting story-wise with these characters. And I will say it's probably one reason ToQger may not get an adaptation to Power Rangers would be the crows. Because they use the Tommy guns as their weapons, as they should, given their motif. But I just kind of feel that if ToQger was to get adapted in the Power Rangers, they would not use the crows, or at least they would not use the footage of them using their guns, which would be rather difficult. So that's probably one strike against them. Glitter, in of herself, was not that interesting. She had kind of an odd relationship with Mio, but I mean, here's the thing. The stories with the villains were interesting because they were doing something. They had conflicts with each other. And I said that in a number of episodes is the best thing about this episode so far is the villain conflicts. But looking at it as a whole, yeah, they had conflicts. They just didn't make any sense, and they just weren't that interesting in the long run. So, yeah, I'm just not impressed with the villains. Now, Zet had the potential of being a great villain, and what they did with him was kind of interesting, but it just didn't pan out. Zet, throughout the series, is fascinated with sparkles. He's lived with darkness his entire life, but he's interested in light. He doesn't understand it. He wants to learn more about it. But what we come to see by the end of the series is that he gives up on it because he says to himself that he basically realizes he can't have it and that I am darkness and there's no changing that. If the series was based on the idea that he was trying to be good, but his nature wouldn't allow him to do it, that would have been interesting. He'd been a classic Sentai villain, but he spends a lot of time doing nothing, and the stuff with Glitter and Schwartz really just kind of detracted from that. I had assumed, based on a couple of clues and his first appearance, that Zet would be, first of all, best friends with Wright, that they would be, getting to know each other, but because they have opposing ideologies, that they would have to become enemies, much like the Fox and the Hound, maybe. And that Zet would eventually embrace light, go against the darkness that he's been raised with, and fight for good, and he would become, a White Ranger or something like that. For whatever reason, that never came through, and Zet just kind of succumbed to his darkness and kind of gave up on the light. But what's actually interesting is he never dies at the end of the series. He actually does survive. He's saved by Glitter, and we have no idea what happened to him or what that's supposed to mean exactly. When Glitter saves him, she doesn't even explain why she's doing it. And if she is, it must be a mistranslation. I just don't understand what's going on there. But again, the darkness is not well defined for us to be afraid of it as a threat, and the villains, they they squabble against each other. They're not particularly interesting, and the most interesting of the characters really didn't get much to do. Here's the thing: if they were human actors and not the rubber-suited monsters and all that, then I think a lot of this could have been better. Because if Glitter was a human female and they got an actress to play her where she can emote and everything, I think I would have felt more for her. Or if Schwartz was human and Glitter was human and all that, it would have meant something more. But as is, it just didn't mean anything to me, and I just was not impressed with these villains overall. The Rainbow Line characters of Conductor, Ticket Wagon, and the President, I have no idea where they come from, if they're imaginary, if they're real people who are on the line, or what. Again, we don't get a mythology or an origin for these characters. Even Lady, she doesn't get anything to her. She's this young girl running the Galaxy line, but we get nothing about her other than she's kind of bitter at the fact that people are losing their imagination day by day. And one of the better lines of the series, where she says, people are not looking up at the stars, they're looking down at their computers, or to paraphrase, basically. Conductor was okay. I thought Ticket was interesting. I want to buy a Ticket doll. He was a little annoying at times, but I like the idea that you had basically the ventriloquist from Batman in there, but on the side of good. You have somebody who is there are two different personalities. They're two separate beings. Wright always believed there was the conductor holding the puppet, but it is my personal belief that the puppet had a life of his own, that he was his own intelligence. Because as we see Wagon hold him later on, that's not Wagon doing the impersonation. That is Ticket as his own being. So that was pretty good. Wagon, why is she immensely into anything? I don't get that. What was that all about? What was that particular tick? She was useless. I don't really have much to say about her, so not going to say anything more. President, why was he a giant rabbit? Or better, why is he a man in a rabbit's head? Never explained. Again, they don't explain it. Is he a human who has set up the Rainbow Line by using his great power and decides to disguise himself as a rabbit? And if that's the case, why is he disguising as a rabbit? Does he have no head under there, and that is his actual head? He's like the Headless Horseman or something? Never explained, and I can't say I like him or dislike him because I don't know what the hell is going on with him. Just, it makes no sense. And just as an aside for the conductor, one of the things I do like about him, I brought this up in the epilogue movie, is that he tried to, when he was given the Bill Dio and the Morpher for the ToQger VLOGS, he wanted to become the Orange Ranger. Now, he didn't get to become the Orange Ranger, and he was disappointed in that. We learned later in the series that he loves action movies, and as we find out in the epilogue movie, he becomes Tokyo Nanago. He becomes the 7th Ranger. He becomes the Violet Ranger. Um, and it kind of speaks to me that he is one of those characters that wants to be the hero. He wants to be out there in the action, but he just can't because he doesn't have the power. He honestly reminds me a lot of Cam from Ninja Storm, that he laments the fact that he knows he can contribute, but he can't because he doesn't have a morpher, and if he goes out there to fight a threat that is larger than himself, then he wouldn't survive. So the fact that they make him Nanago, I think, is great in the film. Although I have to say, and I didn't point this out then, but I'm going to say it now, I just find it lazy they didn't come up with an actual design for him, that they basically just recolored everything for Tokyo Rokugo, because the helmet's repainted, the Zora's repainted, the Morpher's repainted. The only thing that's not repainted is the suit, because it's got a different design on the chest. And I don't understand why they did that, and they just couldn't design a whole new suit. But whatever. Now, actually, one other thing I want to talk about before I get into our characters is that the Rainbow Line also has no consistency in its logic, and here's what I mean. So, the beginning of the series, it was established that you cannot get on the train unless you can see it, and you had a rainbow pass. So, you have to scan to get on. They did a whole episode where Takashi loses his rainbow pass and cannot get back on the train, and the conductor would not allow him back on the train. So keep this in mind. Now, one of the big problems with this is that, as we learn out, a simple fire by burning it will destroy it. So I'm surprised they weren't destroyed earlier in the series. But they violate their own rules throughout the show. So, for example, there's the episode where Glitter and Mio switch bodies, and Mio, in Glitter's body, cannot get on the rainbow line because she doesn't have a rainbow pass. I get that. But then the series contradicts itself at every opportunity. It breaks its own rules. For example, I'm told, because I did not watch it, in the Kamen Rider Gamen crossover, they actually gave Kamen Rider a temporary pass to allow him on the Rainbow Line. Then, in the Kyoryuger vs. ToQger movie, the present allows Daigo to get on the train, despite the fact he doesn't actually have a pass. The villains are able to get on the train without having a pass and invade the line. They're able to get into the hyper terminal without having a rainbow pass to get on. And in one of the final episodes, Wright is able to sneak onto the train by going through the damn window, despite not having his morpher but still having his pass. I don't get it. Why did you establish that type of rule if you were just going to break the damn rule? I don't get it. It's not something that's ever brought up in the show. And then we have like the car carrier Resha and the tank Resha. When we actually see the train in all of its glory as a model, which they did not do enough of, they did too much CGI. The car carrier is never attached. The tank Resha is never attached. It's assumed that they go off somewhere. But as the series says, they don't have enough fuel sometimes. They have to refuel them. And where are they going? Are they going to a terminal? Because it's not established at this point that it's the terminal. And we see them a couple times there. But why isn't it linked to the rest of the train? Because then it won't use any fuel. Because the car carrier Resha can go by itself. Doesn't need to be linked to anything. But if it was linked to, the main Rainbow Line, it wouldn't use any fuel at all and would always be available to ToQger. But again, that's something that's not in there. And then there's the episode where they can't stop the train. It's like, what was that? Unstoppable with Chris Pine, Denzel Washington, where they can't stop the train. They're going to run into a factory and blow everything up. But they forget the fact that the train can travel in 3 dimensions because the train can fly. Yes, it can project a track out in front of itself to go up into the air. Yet that's never explained in that episode why they just can't fly off into the sky and avoid the whole thing altogether. Again, they establish these things in the show, but they never follow them. What's the point of establishing a rule if you're not going to follow them? It's just like in Star Trek. Yes, you can beam through the shields, but this week you can't beam through the shields. Again, why do you have a rule if you're not going to go ahead and follow that rule? Okay, let's finally get to the ToQger themselves, because here's the thing. I could buy the Rainbow Line, and I can buy the children thing, and I can buy the villains and all that stuff, if the main characters were interesting. And as I said, with Ghost Sager, they were boring, but here they're just, I don't know what they are. Okay, first off, we have Wright the leader. I think in terms of Red Rangers leading Sentai teams, he's got to be at the bottom of the barrel because he doesn't instill confidence in his other Rangers. He doesn't seem particularly bright. He is foolhardy. He is stupid at a lot of times. Um, and he's not like the other Rangers. I mean, look at Rio from Jetman and how good he was. Look at Captain Marvelous and how he was. If you're going to be the Red Ranger, you have to instill confidence in those that follow you and into the audience to say, if this guy goes into battle, I will follow him into battle. The ToQger only follow Wright because he is the Red Ranger and their friend. There's nothing particularly interesting about Wright as a character, nor as a leader to make him interesting for me. I mean, the weird thing is, like, when Sentai first started, and this may be a small tangent, they actually had men leading the team that were confident and bold and would make a decision whether it's right or wrong. They would make it and they would own up to it and take responsibility for those decisions. Right, by nature of the show, is a child, but never does he grow up or learn from his mistakes. And the biggest mistake he makes in the show is at the end, where he doesn't want the others to suffer the darkness that's overtaking him, so he decides to strip them of their powers, turn them into children, and basically erase their minds of everything that happened. And that is the dumbest thing I've seen any Red Ranger or character do. Now, could you imagine seeing Geki from Zoo Ranger do this? I certainly don't see him doing this to the other Zoo Ranger. Do you? Do you see Marvelous from GoKaiger doing this? I don't see him do that at all. Do you see the leader of the Shiba clan doing this for the Shinkanger? No, I don't see any Ranger, not even Power Rangers could I see this. I couldn't even see Troy doing something this blazantly stupid. And, when they actually, get their memories back, they don't chastise and beat the crap out of him for the idiocy that he's done. At that point, if I was Hikari, I would have taken over as leader of the team because that was just something dumb that you did. I don't hate him as a character. I know a lot of people pointed out, well, why do you hate Wright and stuff. It's like, I don't hate Wright. I just don't think he's a leader. I don't think he's worthy enough to be the Red Ranger. And yes, you could start him off as this character and have him grow into the leadership role, but they don't do that in the series. Hikari should have been the leader, but because he's Green Ranger, he can't be the leader, apparently. It was really upsetting to watch this and see this guy as the leader, and he was not leadership material. I think the only thing you're going to remember about Wright throughout the series in the years to come is that, oh yeah, he was the Red Ranger that ate a lot. I think that's all the people are going to remember about this character. Takachi. Here's the thing. I don't know. Takachi is a child. I get that. And all these characters, I get it. But is Takachi a hipster? I'm still not 100% sure what a hipster in America is, and I don't even know if they have hipsters in Japan. But what was with the damn hair and the outfit that he wore and his mannerisms and all that? It's like his actor was trying too hard to portray him in a certain way, that he does seem spastic in some way. He seems a little neurotic. It's almost like he's channeling Jerry Lewis without the comedy. I just don't necessarily get Takachi's character. And they did a lot of episodes focusing on him, but again, I don't feel that I've learned anything about Takachi other than maybe his relationship with his brother. You know, I Takachi, I think he and Wright are in the same vein, except Takachi is just not confident in himself. And there was an episode where they talk about him being confident in himself, but he doesn't really learn to be confident. He needs to make a decision. He doesn't make a decision. It costs him, and he and his teammates are injured for that. But he doesn't learn to be confident in that moment and start owning up to his decisions. And that's something that I think the leader should be learning and not the second in command. And Takachi is the second in command if his numbers to be believed. But again, I think it's probably Hikari, and again, we'll get to him in a minute. But here's another thing. The only thing they really kind of did with him as far as a subplot that would happen through multiple episodes is that he had a crush on Mio. And as I said, goes absolutely nowhere. It comes up out of nowhere that he's interested. He tries to talk to her in that gay guy episode. He tries to get near her and stuff. And he's upset where she kiss where he wants to kiss her, and he goes on a date with Akira and all that. Um, the last time we see is he tries to make the moves on her by giving her lunch and almost describe say his feelings for her, but then she goes into this whole crying phase about missing her father, and he just kind of backs off like, "Oh, this is the wrong time to do that," and that's the last we see of it. We never see it again. And I had thought maybe when we get to the epilogue movie, we'll pick up here that he has grown into adult. He's become confident. He's become decisive, and that he's dating me and their boyfriend girlfriend. Maybe we talk about their relationship in the film. Nope, doesn't come up in the slightest. It doesn't come up in the series after that. He never reveals his feelings to Mio. Mio never guesses it. It doesn't mean anything outside of a couple of episodes where he needs to do it, but he doesn't. So I don't get it. I really, really don't. And I didn't care for Takachi. He probably is my least favorite because they did focus on him so much and they didn't do anything interesting with him, and I did not like that. Hikari, on the other hand, my favorite character because he is the serious one. He's most like-minded with me. He tolerates the BS that's happening, but he just kind of slaps people and like, wake up, man, you gotta do this. He is observant of other people's emotions when again in the gay, and I hate to call it the gay guy episode because I don't think he's gay or anything, but please watch the video I did about that because it's like the dumbest episode that they did, and it's really offensive, I think. And as a heterosexual male, I was offended by what was in there. Nevertheless, in that particular episode, Wright wants to go with the others to spy on Mio and Akira's date, and Takachi's trying to take this opportunity to eventually say to Mio how he feels, which he never does. But Hikari recognizes the situation that Wright should not go along. This is something that Takachi needs less people around for, and gets Wright to stay with him. He's observant to other people's emotions and emotional states. And when he has that episode with Kagura in the dollhouse, even though it shouldn't be happening the way it is, he's observant to her emotions and relates with her. Why wasn't Hikari the leader of the team? Why didn't he have more conflicts with Wright? I mean, again, in my favorite episode, the one where they storm the building to get the syringe monster, he's the one who's thinking logically. He's the one that's coming up with the plan and the strategy, and he's ultimately the smartest of all the team. Why wasn't he the Red Ranger? Why was he relegated to fourth in line? And again, he was the one who took away the morpher from Wright with a bit of forward thinking. He's like, yeah, we're not going to allow you to morph and screw this up because who knows what's going to happen. I wish there was more that was done with him. I wish they had more stories with him. Maybe I wanted to see him clash more with Wright. I wanted to see him clash more with the other characters, saying, Wright, you are not a good leader. This is why. And be that foil. We needed somebody to go against him, to be that character. We needed somebody to basically look at this kid as another kid and basically say, hey, you're not doing anything good here. We need to change something. And a conflict between them throughout the series, I think, would have helped that relationship. I really have not much to say about Mio. She's just kind of there. She doesn't have any interesting story arc. When she does get interesting, it's when she misses her father. She's obviously living in a home where she has no mother, no other siblings. It's just her father. Her father, I think, is a police officer, and he's busy all the time, and she's got to take care of him, and he's the only one in her life. And she misses him, and she's afraid she'll never see him again. And again, I got choked up at those scenes because it's genuine emotion. She had an interesting connection with Glitter only because she switched bodies with her, but it wasn't anything too exciting, I think. She's just really kind of there. And she's supposed to be like the tomboyish one, like, because every team, whether it's Sentai Power Rangers, you have the girly girl character and the tomboyish or the more I guess, less feminine, more masculine female character. I mean, yeah, Wild Force, you got Alyssa, and you got Taylor. You got Time Force, you got Katie, and you got Jen. You got, let's see, I'm trying to think of it. Even Mighty Morphin Trini, I would say, is more tomboyish than Kimberly, and Kimberly's more feminine. They always have that. I don't know why you just can't have two confident female characters like that, or two effeminate female characters. You really can't get both. It's always got to be some sort of mix. And again, she's the less effeminate of the two, but again, it doesn't really say much about her. And then, yeah, just I have nothing really to say about her other than her relationship with her father and how that made her feel, but there isn't much else in the series that I can either condemn or condone about her. Kagura, I feel so bad for Kagura because she did have the, based on the epilogue movie, she had the potential of being one of the most interesting characters and one of the most powerful, but they just never realized it. It was just something that just went nowhere throughout the series. Again, she's got this girlish innocence. She doesn't have confidence in herself. She's afraid of everything, and she has to use her imagination to become stronger. But they abandon that through the series. She's static, and the only time we see her change is when she is an adult in the epilogue film. And that character seems a lot more interesting than what we got. Um, I just wish we could have gotten more Kagura. I mean, again, she had like some of the dumbest episodes attributed to her. Again, one of them was with the bathhouse and helping Akira with the bathhouse. One was baking the cake. She just seemed like dead weight a lot of the time. And I'm like, what I always wonder is why do we bother with having 5 or 6 Rangers if we don't plan on developing any of them as characters? I mean, seriously, why don't we do anything with them as characters? It's just really infuriating that we have the Pink Ranger, a character that's meant to appeal to girls and maybe some boys because they think she's hot or something. And frankly, just as an aside here, Mia was the most attractive, but Kagura in the epilogue movie, she looks a lot better when they change her hairstyle, give her more of an adult haircut. But yeah, just I feel bad for her overall. Akira, again, one of the more interesting characters. He is a bad guy who becomes good. Tries to fight his nature, and I thought that would parallel what was going on with Zet. That Zet sees, yes, Akira can overcome his nature. He can go from bad to being good, and that would be an example for Zet, that he can go from bad to good. But that never happens. That's something that's never touched upon within the show. Um, but Akira, interesting character. He has a death wish. Is this my place to die? He is the most serious of all the characters because, again, he's working with children the entire time. Um, and I think as far as being the bad guy once being the good guy, I think they handle it pretty well. I think they handle it better than, say, what they did with Tommy and Mighty Morphin because Tommy was going against his will, where Akira had to have a complete ideological change in his personality to do bad to change to good. I love the effects of when he's the monster, it rains, that he's seeking that rainbow, that he has a goal that he's working towards. And frankly, I'm going to say he works towards his goals a lot more than ToQger ever worked towards their goals of finding their hometown because again that's something that they kind of derailed, and no pun intended, throughout the series is they just did not get to um, stay consistent on what they were trying to do throughout the series. So okay, I've almost talked for an hour here on ToQger, so here are my final thoughts. I think going forward, ToQger is my least favorite now. Is surpassed Goseiger as being my least favorite of the Sentais I have viewed. And that is simply because it has a premise that it doesn't fully explore. It has themes it doesn't fully explore. It doesn't realize its dilemma. It doesn't flesh out its villains. It doesn't flesh out its heroes. It doesn't really make us care for them. It has subplots that go nowhere. It has episodes that go nowhere. And just the overall aesthetic. And, just as a thing, the Tokyo suits, they grew on me. They're not terrible. They're not childish like everybody keeps saying. I think they're decent. They're okay. When they make figure arts, I'm definitely going to buy one of the figure arts of the ToQger. But I just think that it had the potential. It had things it could do, but it was stuck in itself. It couldn't be. It was a show that could have been more, but chose not to be more. It played it safe, is what it did, and that's what really bothers me. Is it played it safe too much? So, I think that's everything I have to say about ToQger in a nutshell. Um, Ninja, I hope once I actually start watching those episodes again, doesn't fall into the same trap this has. I hope GoFundMe, when it comes out in February, can learn from these mistakes as well. We'll see what happens with any of these shows. But again, looking back at ToQger right now, if I had to rank all the shows from my least favorite to my favorite, ToQger is definitely on the bottom, followed closely by GoSager. And maybe one day I will rank the shows, but for right now, that's just kind of where I have it. And that's what I ultimately think of it. But what do you guys think? Did you like ToQger? Did you hate it? Do you agree with the comments I said? Is there something I missed that you want to go ahead and comment about? Please do so. I would like to know what everybody thinks of ToQger. But otherwise, I want to thank you guys for listening. Have a good evening. And the tavern is now closed.